Kelcey, it's great to see you. Thanks for joining.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I think it would be great for everybody to hear more about what you're doing at 365 and what you guys are looking for in companies, and then get a little bit into like what you're seeing in the market and what companies should be doing. But first, why don't we start with just like an intro to 365?
For sure. Appreciate that. Happy to be here. The story of 365 is, I guess, the story of myself and my co-founder, Justin. We've been doing business together for about a decade, and most people assume that we got into e-commerce because we had like a marketing background or worked in e-commerce, which couldn't be further from the truth. About 6 years ago, though, we used an SBA loan to buy an e-commerce business. Shortly thereafter, I kind of developed the thesis that I think we have today. It's probably much more put together now than it was when we first started. When we first started, we just wanted to buy a company. It could have been anything. It didn't have to be e-commerce. We just kind of stumbled into it, frankly, if I'm being really honest. And now through time, we've developed some operating experience and a view on the market, and that's been a great evolution. But I'd be lying if I said it was a grand plan to start with. So 6 years ago, bought brand number one. Today we have 6 brands, portfolio of companies that we operate, and 85 people on the team. Our view, we get lumped into kind of that aggregator bucket. It really wasn't a word, frankly, when we started. I called it 365 Holdings. I just needed a name. There wasn't even a big brand idea behind that. It was, hey, we're going to buy a company and we're going to have more than one, and so we need this holding company. Like, it was not that thought out, to be really candid. Today now, I have a view that is there are many, many high quality, durable, niche, long tail brands. If you look at consumer spending, it kind of starts in America in the 1950s, post World War II, and is dominated by a small number of big companies. And they use mass media, billboard, radio, TV to sell to consumers. Fast forward to the internet, and now we have Facebook and Google and Amazon instead of ABC and billboards and the New York Times and radio. And this unlocks the long tail. So if you have a organic peanut butter brand, a vegan leather belt company, a t-shirts for moms who don't like yoga, like, you could insert the wildest avatars or customer profiles or brand identities, and they exist on the internet thanks to Facebook and Google and Amazon. This long tail of consumer demand is unlocked. And our belief is that there will be hundreds or thousands of what I call a micro brand. It's a brand. So when a person says a product category, the consumer identifies a brand name back to that product category. So we're recording, I'm holding a Yeti water bottle. You say water bottle, I say Yeti. That's a well-known brand. But there are dozens, hundreds, thousands of small ones that, unless you've seen the ad, unless you've bought the product, nobody knows what that is. A pair of shoes that you like, food you give your dog, the thing you clean your car with. There's just thousands of these. And they're going to be subscale businesses. They're going to do 7 or 8 figures in revenue. They're good businesses. They should be profitable. They should be long-term providers of value to their customer base, but they're not going to hit escape velocity. They're not a platform business that can be backed by private equity, can be bought by a strategic, can achieve venture scale returns. They're just small businesses. And so one day they either get sold, or maybe they frankly can die if they don't find a home. We want 365 Holdings to be a platform home where small brands can have a long life ahead of them, get operational excellence and best practices from supply chain to creative and advertising and web dev and kind of the whole 9 yards of. The founder can look back and say, my business is now at a place that's a good second home. It will live on for a long time, be profitable, take care of its customers, create great products. No, my business is not the next publicly traded darling DTC stock. I'm aware of that, but it is a good business and I want it to have a successful home. Our vision is to be that best choice for a home for these small, long tail niche brands that we think have some durable, long-term, profitable reason to exist. And those are the businesses we want to acquire and hold on to.
Well, that was awesome. And there's a lot there to explore. At the beginning and at the end, you use the word durable. So what does that mean to you when it comes to brand?
Yeah, there is actual product market fit between demand from customers and the ability to deliver products that satisfy some need or value proposition of some kind that is independent of arbitrage on paid media. I think we're recording this in almost July of 22, and everybody in the last 18 months woke up to the end of paid media arbitrage and Facebook CAC, and that's well established now. For a long time, though, you could have a business that was effectively a promotion. You could buy clicks at some cost and sell them at some other cost. And you could drop ship pop sockets from China. And you can make cash flow or profit. That wasn't a durable business, though. A durable business has probably the best example would be if people are familiar with Kevin Kelly's Thousand True Fans. Like there's thousands of people who get intrinsic value, and they would be sad if that company was gone. That's durable product market fit. They have a need. The company can produce a product with gross margin that satisfies it. It's a viable business outside of just the arbitrage of paid ads that we saw the last couple of years.
So when 365 is looking at an acquisition, does it have a test or tests for that durability?
It shows up most in LTV and retention, and it shows up most in new customer cohorts by channel and just kind of trends through time. I don't have a hard and fast metric, but those are the first places I'm going to go look is the CAC and LTV cohort reports. What is happening through time? Where are customers coming from? At what cost? On what products? And what are they going and doing through time? And do I get a sense that, and does the team get a sense that 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 experience is durable, will continue to happen at a cost that makes sense, and that we can at least sustain the current level of product innovation, customer service excellence, creative, whatever the secret sauce is that allowed that thing to exist in the world and be successful. Can we at least perpetuate it? And then there's probably some things that we think we can do better, hopefully, that maybe the founder didn't have a chance to execute on, team limitations, capital, whatever it might be. But is there a fundamental fit that's allowed it to be a sustainable business, and we think we can perpetuate it?
Yeah. Do you look at things like pricing power or the ability for a brand to charge above what the competition charges, or is that not important to your math?
Yeah, I think pricing power does matter. I'm probably less worried about it competitively and probably more worried about it from a conversion rate, product market fit. Will the customer pay what we have to charge to exist as a business?
Yeah.
I don't know that we have a good methodology, if I'm being frank, to really solve that on the front end. We're certainly going to underwrite to the history, and
Yeah.
we'll look at some near-term drivers of demand and product cost. I don't want to think that I have that more solved than I do. I think that that's a work in process for us, but I do think pricing power is an important thing. And it probably comes back to that durability of demand component of, is
Yeah.
this a thing people really want and willing to part with hard-earned dollars to pay for? I saw somebody recently talking about kind of the math on AOV and the math on CAC and where CPMs are, and kind of this big holistic picture of if the average American makes this salary, and that breaks down to this much per week of payroll, and they have rent, and they just have to do the math of like how many discretionary purchases could a human make that's a middle American human. Pick your
Right.
customer avatar, 25 to 35, college educated, makes 80K, and just pick this person hypothetically. Do they have the ability to buy one product in your set per week, or one every other week? Or if your AOV $800 and if that's their only purchase for the month and they got to save up for it, breaking down that math psychologically was an interesting exercise I saw somebody do recently about get out into this customer's shoes of like, how real is that? And it's probably more of a finger in the air test of like, does this
Yeah.
pass muster? Does it make sense?
Yeah. I think sort of tangential to that, it's shocking to me when we've looked at the income distribution in the U.S. It's a very steep pyramid. So
Yep.
you're 80K household, but you're getting up to like a 200K household. It's not that many households.
Yep.
So you've got to wonder, unless you're like a real everyday usage, or like you're saying, the discretion. Now, some people will save up, and because it's like, oh my god, I love that brand, and I'm gonna
Sure.
spend a ton of money on it. But I think people aren't really, a lot of times, haven't thought through the sort of potential demand, and then they overestimate the TAM, and then they get themselves in trouble by trying to expand beyond sort of their natural group. I mean, have you found that, or I mean?
Yeah.
You're
So
saying
the way
long-tail businesses that aren't going to ever scale, like,
yeah.
so do you sort of think there's a natural limit to a lot of these businesses, I guess is my question.
That is a fundamental problem to solve that is both a pro and a con. So I look at our portfolio today, and we've got brands ranging from emergency food to cloth diapers to at-home fermentation supplies to hair restoration shampoo and a few other things. When you end up in that niche, that long tail of small brands, pro and con. TAM is probably limited. There's only so many humans that want to buy what you're selling. There is a non-mass market demand problem to solve for. You can either create demand through advertising or capture it through advertising and Amazon, but like there's only so much demand, only so many of these things being sold. Thinking about that on one end of the spectrum, and then thinking about the durability of that demand on the other end of the spectrum, making a judgment call. If I'm buying this business that we think is going to grow at some certain rate, I think our businesses should grow CAGR, the GDP of the internet. In other words, if the internet is growing at 5 or 10 or 15% a year, and US GDP is at 3%, I think we're going to grow at 5 or 10 or 15% a year, plus or minus. I don't think we're going to grow at 30%, 40%, 100%. I just don't think it's possible. We're in niche markets that only have so much demand. So that's on one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is, okay, there's only so many players. We can be a best practices executor in the space. We can drive costs through scale. We can do things that other businesses we compete with in the niche maybe aren't capitalized to do. And it's a pro and a con. It's just part of our business model. I think through time we'll, by necessity, need to eventually perhaps exit some of the smaller brands where we do saturate the TAM and get into larger parts of the long tail. I don't have a good predictive model for when and how that will happen, other than I think through time it will inevitably happen. I just don't have a good forecast to predict which ones it will be in that portfolio. We see some amount of like power law outcomes of we make an investment, we go buy something, put a bunch of work, financial capital, human capital, time, energy, and on the front end, what I knew then versus what I know now in the rearview mirror was wildly different outcomes versus expectations. And so we'll continue to kind of evolve that process, but it's very much an art and not a science. And it's a fun challenge to solve on an ongoing basis.
All right. Well, there's clearly a good story or two in what you just said. So, like, what would be an example of going in, you thought this, and coming back, you thought, something else?
Our largest business today is our emergency food business. We bought it heavily distressed. Paid very modest amount for it in hindsight, and it does a lot of revenue relative to the original purchase price. Yes, we've rebuilt it from the ground up. We've done a new website, new brand. We've done a lot. And the pandemic and demand from the last 2 years of the world being a bit upside down has driven demand in emergency supplies. No doubt about that. However, as a percentage basis of where it was and where it is now, you couldn't have predicted the home run success that we're proud to stay with that one. I have another brand in the portfolio that we've paid a much higher price for that has had much less excellent financial outcomes through time. A whole bunch of reasons why that probably don't make sense to get into for today's conversation, other than to say at the outset, the distressed brand with the low price tag and a question mark versus this multiple for this really long established stable thing, which one's going to look better? Wouldn't have guessed what happened.
Yeah, interesting. And are those learnings that you can now apply to new brands, or is the learning that you just never know?
Yes to both. Yes, there are learnings every time. I think anybody that's operating in acquisitions, in business and life, you'll learn things. I joke that every transaction, the purchase agreement template gets a few paragraphs longer, and I try to avoid that, but it's inevitable. Our due diligence checklist grows every time. It's just kind of part of the deal. But the learning for me has been that we will have, like it or not, a portfolio of outcomes that has a wild distribution that is hard to forecast. And so good at bats, and many of them with intelligent underwriting and good decision making are important, will produce uncertain outcomes, and getting enough good at bats with enough good inputs through time will pay off.
Yeah.
So doing diligence and getting as many at bats as possible to swing at is an important part of the plan going forward.
I want to jump back to something you said a couple minutes ago, which shocked me, frankly, where you said the growth rate is somewhere between the CAGR of the internet and then, economic growth.
US GDP as a floor, yeah.
Right. So you're like, oh, okay, single digits or what, 10%, whatever it is. I mean, that's like heresy in the world of VC and,
It is.
And in certain markets. Um, I mean, I guess there's so much in there that I'm trying to get to, but like,
Yeah.
did people basically overestimate the potential growth, or was it that they thought more companies could achieve those stellar growth rates than actually could? Or, is there just basically a rethinking that needs to happen that people are like, look, 10-20% annual growth is like ridiculously good? I, I,
Probably just a different maybe culture or set of expectations or corner of the internet or corner of business perhaps to
yeah.
shade that answer. I think certainly if you are used to seeing disruptor venture backed attack this large market, do the DMVB playbook, like yes, if that's the story that you approach, hey, we're buying e-commerce businesses with, I would expect you to think that my statement about growth rates is silly. If, on the other hand, your approach is these are fundamentally retail consumer discretionary businesses, which have existed in America for hundreds of years, and they were never expected to grow at these crazy growth rates. That was never a thing. The only difference is that instead of it being on First and Main and you're a shopkeeper and you walk in every day and you unlock the door, now we have Facebook and Amazon and UPS and FedEx. Um, I don't know why we would have these crazy growth rates. We're not attacking these large markets with disruption and a war chest of venture funding. We're buying fundamentally sound small businesses that have the wind at their back of consumer demand and consumer shopping online. But they're still just fundamentally niche consumer businesses that provide a product to consumers who are in the market for that thing. Part of it is like that TAM approach of take the mattress business, right? Like so many companies got backed to do the bed in the box. I don't need to rehash that here, but we knew how many mattresses were sold in this country. You could do venture scale math to figure that out. We sell kombucha kits. I don't know how many people want to drink kombucha, let alone make their own, but it's a smaller number and it's not going to grow that fast. I think it'll grow it aggressively, but it's not going to look like changing the way consumers buy mattresses.
Well, if why would you sell one of these companies if like they're growing along, they don't, but you'd said, well, maybe we'd have to exit them and reinvest.
Yeah.
Like if they're good companies, why wouldn't you just like sort of keep them in the portfolio? Are they drags on overhead or what?
It becomes a capital allocation problem, not necessarily of dollars, but of time. Um, we see that the team can only scale so much on a shared services model to focus on so many things at once. We're developing a process internally that I stole, frankly, from big business. There's this McKinsey process called a growth share matrix where you map growth rate of the industry you're in versus your market share. And is your industry growing or shrinking? And is your market share growing or shrinking? And it gives you kind of an intellectual answer of where to invest capital. Capital could be financial dollars or resources of any kind. In our case, it's humans and labor hours, particularly in marketing and ops and things like that. And the answer comes when you have cash cows, you should harvest cash. When you have stars that are growing in a growing market, you should invest into them. If you have question marks or if you have laggards, if the right capital allocation decision is to divest, solve the question marks. Either they're either stars or they're laggards, or we need to divest of them. And so we're trying to build a regimen and methodology internally to say, can we classify things as cash cows, as stars, as question marks, or as laggards? And if we can build that methodology, can we have the discipline to then let that algorithm decide when to sell, where to invest, and then ultimately what to buy next? So
Yeah.
we're putting some work into that. It's a big project for this year. We're at the halfway point of the year. I think starting next year, it will be a better tool in our toolkit. It's a slow moving decision making framework, but I think it's a helpful lens that people smarter than me at McKinsey figured out a long time ago. And it was built for big business, but applies so well to what we're doing with niche e-commerce.
Yeah. Interesting. So what, switching gears, if I'm a founder of, brand, like what would make me an ideal candidate for 365?
Couple few years of profitable earnings and steady, consistent growth, and a durably sustainable demand driver in the business. So what that looks like to us is probably something that's more than 3 years old. Probably, we have businesses that are 12 and 18 years old in the portfolio. Definitely evidence of like product market fit through things like reviews, organic traffic, email list. There's content or community that's also super helpful. A lot of those things, once we get past that like CAC LTV cohort analysis, we look at those softer metrics of like, do we have a dominant position on Amazon and Google in the SERPs? Do we have voice of customer with reviews and feedback that's a moat around the business? Do we have audiences and owned media that we can tap into for things? So all of those things add up to be more attractive, more valuable, more beneficial to us as an acquiring platform to then leverage for the future. And the more those are underutilized, the more maybe we can grow it faster than that conservative expectation. I'm just not going to underwrite anything more than that. Even if the business I'm looking at has grown 50% year over year, I, as a buyer, will underwrite it down to 10 or 15 because I'm just not convinced that we can sustain that.
Yeah.
And I certainly don't want to fund it predicated on that being the case.
Right. And so, what level of profitability do I have? Like, what would be an attractive EBITDA
Yeah.
margin here for you
Uh,
guys?
we won't today. We won't look at anything that's not at least 500,000 of annual cash flow. EBITDA is a good enough metric, in my opinion, for cash flow for most cases in e-commerce. Most
Okay.
cases, and that all things being equal, a greater EBITDA margin percentage being better. If it's at least 15%, maybe 20, if it's more than that, fantastic. But that high teens is a good expectation.
Yeah.
We're gonna have a different cost structure. Our team burdening in, et cetera. So I kind of worry more about contribution margin because we're gonna have our own cost structure that we'll figure out on a go forward.
Yeah.
But could that business be operated in a profitable cost structure historically? And then my new costs should be the same or hopefully better because we have some scale and some efficiency. But high teens as a starting place and at least
Yeah.
500K of cash flow.
I mean, that's like high teens. If you look at the Bainbridge DTC index, I mean, you know, I think the highest in there is like 30. You know, I should be looking at it right now, but you know, the 20s would be is great for a public
Yeah.
company. So high teens is a real achievement. I mean, how do these founders? What drives that profitability? Are people just like how have they gotten themselves there? Is it they've yeah, I guess I'll just leave it at that. Like, how do you think people are?
I think it's back to the topic earlier. It's like they discovered durable niche product market fit. Customers pay an appropriate price on an appropriate cost of goods, and like the business model fundamentally works at that size. The question mark for me is what does it look like on a go forward? And again, if I underwrite to the GDP of the internet, 10 or 15% CAGR, not venture scale expectations, that math is relatively straightforward. Like, will people still buy cloth diapers? Well, probably. Like, we should do a good job with it. Will they still want shampoo to make their hair look thicker and fuller? Yep, people still losing their hair. We're all vain. Like, that's a
Yeah,
market to be in. Um, Back to my like earlier example, like drop shipping pop sockets. I don't know, like that's a
yeah,
fad. There's technology risk there. So we won't do fashion. We won't do technology. I wouldn't do iPhone cases. There's certain risks I wouldn't want to take on. Nothing wrong with those businesses. They have there's plenty of great operators in that space. Plenty of great brands that do things where they take what I would call technology risk, clothing, actual technology, cords, cables, cases, things like that. That's just a different innovation cycle that makes sense for us. I love branded products that consumers have affinity for.
right. And is there, one thing you'll hear commonly is like, oh, I love consumables, so your shampoo business, obviously. Do you have a preference in those areas or?
It certainly helps, but in my opinion, it goes back to the earlier statement of like the retention cohorts. It'll show up there.
Mhm.
All things being equal, I would buy a straight sale business with no recurring revenue that's contractual that has better retention metrics over a subscription business with high churn and CACs that we're competing against the venture funded competitors. Like that's probably a harder game to play for us as an organization. I'll just go to the straight sale business and we'll figure out how to do good email marketing.
Right.
That's probably an easier mountain for me to climb.
Okay, so that good, but you don't have a preference for a business model like subscription over straight sale? It's long. Okay, and then
My preference my preference would be diversity. Every business has a lead, a product that is the leading SKU, a channel
yeah,
that's the leading customer acquisition. Like, there's something. I just don't want 100% of one thing. We won't buy an FBA pure play Amazon business. We won't buy in a business that's 80% Facebook traffic. I love diversity. If we've got 20% revenue on Amazon, 10% on Subscribe and Save, and 70% that's traffic of email, affiliate, Google. We've never done Bing, and we're not that good at Facebook. Love that. That's a home, like we know how to sink our teeth into that one. It'll take us some time. We'll figure it out, but like that's a business I want. We know what to do across that.
Right. So the opposite of that being like, hey, 80% is coming from Facebook. You're like, well, how much more can I optimize this? And I'm not sure that I can make it work
I
anywhere else.
guarantee you, I can't do a better job than the person that's currently making that work really well.
Yeah,
They're the founder. They figured this out.
yeah,
Who am I to think that I can do that better than them?
yeah.
I don't, maybe, but like I don't want to take that risk. That's not a good
Right.
investment for me when they're the smartest person that got it to this point.
So you don't want an pure Amazon business, but what about omni-channel? How is that
Love
important
it.
to you at all, or a risk?
Diversity is great. Concentration is bad. Diversity is good. A little bit of a lot of things.
Hmm.
Amazon wholesale, brick and mortar distribution. If it's profitable, like love it. We've got the team to support it, and I would lean into that for sure.
So the other thing going, I think that a lot of times founders don't factor in is like life after the sale. Like, what does life after the sale look like for a founder for you guys?
If I were to look back, I think all but one individual that I can think of knew they were going on to do something else entrepreneurial. There was a motivation for their sale. They had a reason that was some business or career or life change objective. Maybe only one founder, perhaps, was going to quasi retire or be done in some way, shape, or form. They're still a young family. I think many of them have the sense that they were the 0 to 1, even on a non-venture scale. They felt they could start, and I felt they had a business I wanted to buy, and that we could go from 1 to N, but they were going to go 0 to 1. I think as founders, myself and Justin, who runs our day to day, we are not 0 to 1 people. We are 1 to N operators, and I want to find those really good 0 to 1 founders to take their baby off their hands and give it a great long-term home.
And okay, so that wasn't the answer I was expecting. When you do a deal, are the founders like out entirely, or are they, are you keeping them around for a little bit? Like what? How does it work?
Yeah. Our historical process has been
Yeah.
we buy 100% of the business, pack it up, and other than like we don't need to be trained or transitioned, other than the nuances of the business, the suppliers, the vendors, real specific stuff. Like we don't need to learn Shopify, we don't need to learn Facebook ads. We know how to run an e-commerce business. Maybe not your e-commerce business, but we understand what to do with the thing. So we position ourselves as a low maintenance, low hassle acquirer. And historically, every business we have pursued, they have wanted to exit completely. We're happy to do that. We don't have a place for them on our team. We have a shared services group. We don't necessarily need a founder to join us. And likewise, only once have we inherited any meaningful amount of employees or team members or contractors. We tend to have a intent to acquire that is strategic in that we're going to use our shared services platform to scale and grow and reduce cost. Many of the businesses, sometimes in the scale we look at, are already packaged or positioned to be very dynamic or flexible in those regards. They're not a platform scale company with a full team, and those are sometimes easy things to do. That being said, all of that is subject to change in a future environment. Like next week, we could strike a deal with a founder that makes a very different model for us going forward. Historically, that has been our process. I expect that to continue, but who knows what the future brings.
So very different than selling or taking PE money, where you sort of sign up to
Correct.
be management under a boss, and then God help you if you screw up.
Yep.
Okay, so
We look for
you're
some
down
seller
there.
skin in the game and earn that or seller note, nothing
Yeah,
crazy, 10 to 20%. Like we want to know that they're invested in the success
yeah.
and willing to stake some of the valuation on that. But, and we've done everything, by the way. We've done over asking, fraction of asking, heavily seller finance. We've done every structure you could imagine. But traditionally, like, hey, it's a good business. I'm willing to pay you a fair price for it. I need you to hold on to a note for 2 or 3 years, something reasonable. And that's been a good fit for the businesses we've been pursuing.
So you started before the aggregator boom, right? How has that changed the dynamics of finding great companies and speed to offer and closing and things like that?
The vast majority of the aggregators are focused on pure play Amazon FBA. Some of them have said they want to do D2C, but best I can tell, and from talking with others, that's conversation talking points and not market activity. If somebody has data to the contrary, I'd love to know that. I do know the handful of other D2C holdcos or aggregators. There's only a few of us, so we all tend to chat a little bit. There's just not that many people doing it. I was somewhat resistant to the term aggregator when that came out. I'm like, oh, that's not us. I do think our business model is different. Long-term capital, long-term home for businesses, not private equity, not venture capital.
Right.
So it's a different approach, I suppose.
So
We'll see how that evolves through time.
is Holdco a better when
Yeah.
you guys okay? So for the Holdcos, but what you're not so you're not seeing this like kind of like a gazillion business brokers bringing you like 900 deals and
I do get those gazillion business brokers with the 900 deals, and I look through them every week, and I sift through them, and the ones that we like, we'll chase down. The
yeah,
fact is, the market is bigger for things that look more like a. I think what was the old joke? It was like the garlic press on Amazon was like the original like poster child of like an example product, and
yeah,
Jungle Scout used it for years in their marketing. So like the typical quote unquote FBA stereotype garlic press, kitchen
yeah,
accessory business. Those I don't need to spend a lot of time with those, right?
yeah.
When I find something interesting, we'll spend more time and go deeper. Again, I don't think that the FBA aggregators of the world are who we're competing with. I don't think they're looking at those transactions that
Yeah.
we are.
And how does deal flow come in? And I'll move off this after this, but is it
Yeah,
from brokers, investment bankers, or direct by the, or sort of all of the above?
everything we've purchased to date has been a broker or investment banker or M&A advisor of some kind, marketing a business with a sell side mandate in some way, shape, or form. We do get inbound deal flow. Most of it, unfortunately, is not a good fit. However, I love it because it gets me a chance to connect with founders and talk. I love to talk with operators about their brand, their product. Like, I love connecting with those folks. I tell a lot of them, like, 3 seconds in, I already know that, like, I'm not going to provide what it is they're looking for, but I want to be their friend. I want to talk to them. Like, I'm happy to talk shop and compare notes. And, like, I love to do that because I'm an entrepreneur. I'm very frank up front that like I'm not the solution they're necessarily looking for. I would love one day to build a brand that does attract deal flow that is deal flow we can execute on. In the meantime, I'm happy to build my network and relationships and just talk to other entrepreneurs because I find that to be a fun
Yeah.
thing to do.
What advice would you give to a founder? So if the best solution is coming in through a broker or investment banker, what should founders be looking for in that broker or banker?
Uh, Maybe the step before that would be like aligning your business ambitions with the reality of the market. Are you building something of venture scale? Are you building something truly unique that can attract a strategic buyer or not? If I'm being super candid, I have more of those like one-off founder conversations where their expectations, God bless them, are just wildly off base of like what they think they view as a strategic pitch to a
Yeah.
buyer. We're typically not a strategic buyer, but if I'm just being really candid with them, I'm like, I'm sorry, like I don't think that giant company X views that particular asset as something they want to pay 30 times revenue for. Like if I was you, my advice like would be to not pursue that strategy. I don't think that that's going to be what you want it to be. I think the headlines on Crunchbase and TechCrunch and the Thrasio fundraise and like just the news is an easy distraction for founders that maybe haven't gotten a good broker or good investment banker or good advisor to tell them here's what's actually happening with assets like yours. And everybody wants to be the headline. And the fact of the matter is that's the long, long, long tail. It's a fraction of businesses. I have a ton of respect for people that can pull that off. I don't think I'm in that category. We're buying small businesses at reasonable prices and like doing boring operational stuff. Um, I just would encourage folks to like really align expectations with market and get advice from people that you trust about what you actually have and what you don't actually
Yeah.
have in terms of a viable premium asset or just a great business that doesn't command this crazy huge valuation, which is fine. I would just advise you to calibrate your expectations.
So are the valuation expectations just completely out of line, or are people doing the math wrong? Or okay,
Sometimes, sometimes I think people overestimate, in my opinion, from the conversations I've had, many people overestimate what they hope is a strategic
yeah,
thing. Hey, I built this great brand. Well, it does $1 million a year and it pays you six figures and like you have a contractor. Like that's a great lifestyle business. I don't think giant company X doing 100 million cares. I'm just being
right,
candid. Like they don't care about your $1 million
yeah,
business. I think it's a great small business. Let's embrace it for what it is. I don't think they're going to pay you $30 million for it because it doesn't move the needle for them. Like it really
yeah,
doesn't. It's just a brand. It's a good brand. It's a quality business. it's not this big strategic asset that you hope that it is. I would advise you to embrace what it is, not what you want it to
Yeah.
be.
Let's switch gears a little to the change in economic environment or the market or whatever you want to call it. What do you think has been the biggest um, impact? And I'll it's a, well, yeah. Let me just ask that, and I'll tell you kind of what we've seen.
Yeah. I'm hoping the answer is cooling expectations on all fronts for valuation. As a buyer, that's a very selfish thing to say, but I think that is the practical and pragmatic answer. From talking with folks about transactions, we're seeing that actively change in the venture side, and the private equity side, and the SMB side. Expectations are getting realigned, so that's good news for me as a buyer, I guess. I am concerned about future paths for raising capital as we need it, debt or equity, whatever that's going to look like through time. I think it'll be more challenging. It's still a bit early. I wish I had some big insight. I think I see a small, unique slice of the world, and I think things are cooling a little bit by, call it a turn of EBITDA on the expectations. Prices might be down. I'm probably not qualified to speak beyond that, but my general sentiment is it's
Yeah.
cooling. One last asterisk on that. There's still always a buyer for a good
Yeah.
business. If you produce cash flow, if you solve customers' problems, if you have an actual asset, you can market it and get a good, reasonable, fair value. Good, reasonable, fair value today is not what it was in January of this
Right.
year. Just
Yeah.
isn't.
Well, I think it's that last problem or that last statement that is so important. Like,
It's an anchoring bias.
say that again.
It's an anchoring bias. I had this price
Yeah.
expectation, and now the bid is here. My house last week was worth
Right.
this, and the realtor brings
Right.
like, it's an
Right.
expectation. As an entrepreneur, that is devastating emotionally. I get it. I would feel the same
Right.
way. I'm not looking forward to the day that happens to me. I'm sure it will. It's part of the entrepreneurial game, I
Yeah.
think.
Well, one thing that we're seeing is, people I think still have unrealistic growth expectations, that are going to get fueled by customer acquisition. I'm like, oh, if I just could really figure out my, customer acquisition, I'd be back on path. And I'm not sure that everybody's got
I
religion around profitability and cash flow.
mm, I've got this opinion that maybe non-consensus. It's a strong opinion of mine. I'm curious what you think. I firmly believe that if you are subscale, call it under 50
Yeah.
million, SMB, or even a scaling small business that is maybe venture funded or private equity, whatever. But if you're subscale, as a CEO, as an executive, product market fit is incredibly important, but that you need to have a deep and passionate understanding of customer acquisition and be the driver of that. I do not believe that anybody under 50 million, the leadership, should ever delegate the responsibility for growth or new customer acquisition. You can use an agency if that's the right structure for your business, but the agency is not going to solve your problems. Them doing new creative next week is not going to hit your CAGR target for your growth rate on revenue. That's your problem as a CEO or a founder. A consultant is not going to fix your Facebook ads and cut your CAC in half. That's not possible. I don't care what the tweet thread from somebody said last week or the podcast. That's your job as a founder, is to solve that durably through time. I think it's the most important thing I can do in our organization is lead responsible conversations around growth expectations and forecasting. It's really, really
Yeah.
hard. I don't even think I'm that special at it by any means. I do think it's a very important thing that leaders, founders, CEOs, executives should own. And I feel like there's many people who want to pass the buck to an expert to tell them how to do it. And my advice is that's got to be something you own if you're in the driver's seat.
Yeah. That's interesting. And what is it? Is it when you're saying that they're owning it? Is it setting the right metrics around that, like CACs and
I think
forecast?
strategy and
Yeah,
expectations, to expect that no switching agencies won't cut CAC in
got
half.
it. Right.
Like take a finger in the air, it's $100 AOV and a $40 CAC on Facebook. We're spending $3,000 a day. That sounds like relatively reasonable. It's unlikely that some guru is going to take your CAC from 40 to
Right.
20. Like some metric, conversion rate, CPM, clicks, something would have to happen so dramatic that this great machine learning platform didn't figure it out before you, and the new account structure hack guru guy is going to fix it. I just think that that's not
Yeah.
realistic, and that's a responsibility of leadership.
Yeah. What about that applied to like financial planning and forecasting? I mean, we I think sometimes run into businesses where it tends to be underinvested, and often outsourced.
Yeah, I think that the way I'm wired is to have a finance bent. I'm now seeing in our phase of business that it's super important to surround myself and my co-founder, who's also pretty good at Excel and understands financial modeling. The two of us, we need our VP of finance and our VP of supply chain. We need more sophisticated help. There's not enough hours in the day. Um, that requires a certain amount of professional help at a certain point, whether you contract a Bainbridge or an outsourced CFO or you build the team internally. I do think having some rigor there is super important. Thankfully, Justin and I were more than dangerous enough with finance and accounting and a spreadsheet that we could get to this
Yeah,
point. But last year, we started investing in proper leadership team, particularly around finance last year and supply chain this year, and it's made a big difference
same.
in the team. It's slow. It's not the fun part of the
Yeah,
business, but it's very necessary.
yeah. Are there common mistakes that you see founders making? Like, currently in this environment, you're like over investing or under investing in certain functions or
Maybe the just not to be the dead horse, but the profitability, business model questions of like, are you optimizing for this revenue growth ramp that's going to get you around to funding, or are you optimizing to be in business next week and provide a lifestyle for your
yeah,
family? And being very honest about which of those two things you
yeah,
want and which of those two things are possible given the business you're in, the market, like all the other externalities,
yeah,
CPMs, supply chain, cash on hand. Like take your aspirations against everything that is reality for you and
yeah.
calibrate.
That example you were giving a few minutes ago of like the $1 million business and the guy's like pulling out six figures or he or she
Yeah,
pulling out six figures. That's like
great
it's a great
lifestyle
lifestyle
business. It's
business. I mean,
fantastic.
you see so many of these businesses that could get single digit millions or tens of millions of dollars with that type of cash flow that you're describing, 15, 20 plus percent.
My current best idea is to wait for the fall when some venture backed companies become venture orphans or fallen angels, whatever word you want to describe, and they were going to do it from 20 million of revenue to 40, and they couldn't hit their funding round, and now it's getting fire sailed. And I'm going to take it from a $20 million revenue business to 12 million, and it's going to be 3 million of EBITDA profitable because we cut out all this craziness.
Yeah,
And on a revenue metric, it looks like a big loss, but on a profitability basis, it's now a great asset to own. I'm looking forward to finding deals like that
yeah,
to underwrite, and I fully believe shrinking some of those businesses that had overestimated capabilities of growth and then right sizing them down on a P&L basis. And I'm not talking about like the crazy like private equity style like fire everybody stuff, but just the metrics of like revenue, COGS, ad spend, and leave SG&A out of the conversation. Just right sizing contribution
yeah.
margin expectations on a go forward basis. There's lots of assets like that that I've already started to
Yeah.
see, and I think we'll see
I love
more.
it. I mean, I don't love that will happen to these companies, but I think it's really smart because I just think there's going to be a ton of them.
It, I feel bad for founders that don't achieve their goals. Don't get me wrong. I'm human, but I'm also a capitalist to say there's an
Yeah,
opportunity. And if we can be the solve for that, I'm happy to capitalize on it. If we can be a good soft landing for those types of businesses, accomplish our financial metrics and goals, of course, while also respecting what was built and taking it on to exist in the future, is a great opportunity that I plan to try to execute on.
are you guys funded? For that strategy, are you just all funded from your cash flow, or are you raising money as well to do these?
Historically, we have had no outside equity in the business. We have borrowed by hook and by crook anything we've needed and used retained earnings. We've maxed out SBA exposure as founders. We've guaranteed everything to date. I'm starting to understand that our next phase of growth might require us to make some changes in capitalization, whether we syndicate the next deal. I don't know exactly what that will look like. I do expect at some point I will need to bring in outside capital. I'll need to find a financial sponsor to partner with. I don't exactly know what that looks like just yet. It's a problem I'm actively trying to solve. But I think we've hit a point where if I want to continue growing at a certain pace and I don't want to slow down, that'll be a
Yeah,
necessity. On the other hand, we could choose to slow down, just run off retained earnings, maybe recalibrate our expectations for growth slower and do fewer deals. And that'll be a decision we need to make at a
yeah.
crossroads.
Given you mentioned at one point sort of different types of equity and debt financing, for capital for these businesses. So in the stage, they've found some product market fit, but they're not ready to sell to you yet. But they would like to raise equity. Like, what do you think is that type of company ripe for a new type of equity? And if so, what does it look like? Because the VCs aren't going to walk into that company and be like, "Oh yeah, you're planning on
Yeah.
growing at 10% a year." Like, okay.
Again, back to calibrating expectations. I think depending on all the inputs to that equation, if a founder really is passionate about their business, and again, I don't know their full economics and
Yeah.
preferences, and there's a lot that goes into this, but I think the right answer, more often than not, is probably crowdfunding for a lot of folks. You get I'd say advantaged economics most likely, probably from non-institutional capital source. You maybe have an engagement place with your customers that lock in some loyalty and some dollars and things. That's certainly not a TechCrunch sexy headline, and I don't know, again, all the inputs that go into the future exits, and like there's a lot of variables there. I do think for many subscale businesses that have an audience, particularly, that's a great place to go looking for capital.
So it would be, go to your customer base, your big fans. They would get equity, and what is it? And sort of like a loyalty program, maybe, or is there are you thinking there's like a dividend in it? Or
I think
what?
smart entrepreneurs should take advantage of anything and everything if they're going to do
Yeah,
that. Perks,
yeah,
loyalty, access, content, like the way that any of the equity crowdfunding sites can create packages and tiers. I think it's an entrepreneur's playground of
yeah.
creativity to match cash coming in with things people want. I think access is probably underrated if you have a real like raving fan base. Private chats and phone calls and AMAs and interview, like you can do all kinds of stuff.
Wow,
I think that's a creativity
that's
problem.
interesting. All right, so have you seen that in anybody's cap tables, or is that's an idea that?
That's something I've recommended to several people. And I think one or two have
Yeah.
done.
What do you see in cap tables? Are the cap tables like just friends and family mostly, or when you're doing your
Typically, it is founders, maybe friends and
so the
family.
founders like what would be a typical ownership percentage of a founder of one of your acquisitions?
Most of them would be, by and large, 100% founder equity.
Oh my god, that's awesome. So they're not even
Yeah.
doing equity to the
Yep.
employees.
Mm-mm.
Holy smokes! So
Nope.
someone's selling it like 10 million, and they're just taking it all. I mean that's or whatever the number is, 5.
1, 3, 10, like any of those numbers. Yeah, that's the American Main Street small business dream of I built a small
Yeah,
business, worked nights and weekends, and used my credit card for payroll, and like all those stereotypes, and then we get bought for $3 million,
yeah.
or whatever the number is. So yes, that is the
That's gotta be
typical
fun
for us
when you close that deal and the wire goes through to see.
for sure.
You almost kind of want to have them in the conference room when that happens. Yeah,
For
record
sure.
that. It would be so cool. Um, Tell me about you're based in Akron, so tell me about that. Like how's that been? Is it can you recruit? Like are you like the number one job to get in Akron, or is it like is it an advantage? Or are you guys remote? How do you can anybody join, or do you have to move to Akron?
Uh, so both my founder and I have always been in Northeast Ohio our whole life. So Justin lives down in the Canton area. I live a little more up in Cleveland, and Akron's halfway, so that's where HQ is. Our employee base today is 99% in-house, on-site, full-time, W-2, go to the office 3 or 4 days a week, work from home, kind of flexible, quasi-hybrid, but like we're an in-office, in-person culture. We
Yeah.
had our Q3 kickoff meeting today, and everybody but like one person I think couldn't be in, and they were on the Google Meet, and like everybody else was in the kitchen, right? It's a big
Cool.
kitchen, but like all 50 people
That's
were in
awesome.
there. Um, and that has been an interesting dynamic with hiring. So I do think when it comes to line level labor, warehouse pick, pack, and ship, manufacturing, we do have challenges like everybody does with the labor force, and being a small participant is
Yeah.
hard. The flip side of the coin is that for career hires in the office that are doing supply chain or finance or HR or operations or marketing, it's better. There is not a hotbed of performance marketing professionals in Northeast
Yeah.
Ohio. We're beginning to build them and train them, and I think the ones that have good opportunities come find
Yeah.
us. it's definitely, we are definitely a leader competitively locally to recruit marketing talent and e-commerce talent. But the talent pool is small. So we've put a stake in the ground that we will train and develop. Some of our best employees, probably 4 or 5 of them, started as interns. We trained them. Yes, they're bright. They're incredibly smart. They did get a college education, but they'll all tell you that college was kind of like the marketing wasn't that helpful, and all the good stuff
It
they
wasn't?
learned working or listening to podcasts or taking courses that we paid for from some people.
Yeah.
Like they got their real education in the internship, right? And now they're highly valuable employees that we're excited to have. But we built them into a professional. We didn't buy them as a
Yeah.
professional. And we're proud to do that. Like as co-founders, Justin and I think that we're buying these brands and we're giving them a home, and the founder gets to, like, that's a good thing. But that doesn't give me a satisfaction anymore if it's a diaper company versus a food company. I don't have a particular passion for the brands that we own. I have a real passion for our team and for the organization that we have. And so being able to recruit raw talent and build professionals, and occasionally we get one recruited away, and like that's not fun. But like having that culture and watching people grow and get promoted and become leaders, like that is something
Yeah.
that we as founders are really excited about, building the org. The brands that we own, we want to have a great platform for. I think it'd be a mistake if I was super excited about one of them because it would get all my attention. I think it's better if they're things I'm not that passionate about, and we can be passionate about the team and the employees.
Yeah. That's awesome. Cool. All right. When you have your offices in Akron, you have your portfolio companies. Are there any times that you get everybody together?
So internally as an organization, we use the EOS process. We have the whole meeting cadence and whatnot. But I found inside of e-commerce, and more importantly outside of e-commerce, there's a groundswell of this like holding company idea that's happening right now. I have a friend in town. His name's John. He runs a portfolio of home services business, HVAC, plumbing, mold remediation, stuff like that. And between Twitter and podcasts and certain communities online, we just noticed there's a lot of these like small mini holdcos. We all want to be Warren Buffett and own Berkshire Hathaway one day. And so John and I are actually hosting a small conference in Cleveland this summer. It's called HoldCo Conf, built for holding companies. I think we'll have 5% of the attendees that are e-commerce people. And then there'll be SaaS, and there'll be manufacturing and trucking and restaurants. It's kind of a diverse, eclectic
Nice.
crowd talking about probably less venture capital and less private equity, and much more like buy a steady, durable, small business, compound them through time, give them great
Yeah.
ownership. A lot of kind of wild, interesting ways to make money and make a career out of holding companies. So as passionate as I am about e-commerce, I'm also passionate about that kind of holding company world, and excited for the first annual HoldCo Conf.
All right. So when is it?
July 24, 25, and 26 in Cleveland, Ohio, at HoldCo Conf on Twitter, or HoldCo Conf,
And can people
CONF.com.
still sign up?
Tickets are still available, or you could DM me if you have any questions if somebody wants to reach out. But tickets are available, and it'd be a lot of
Nice.
fun. I'm staking our claim on the food and beverage and experience, and the content will also be very, 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 very
Yeah, there's
good.
gonna be some entertainment. I guess I shouldn't have asked that without knowing. But
There will be. Depending when this episode leaks, I don't want to give any secrets away, but there will be some fun
yeah.
stuff. Yes, it'll be it's not a conference. It's not a go to a hotel bar
Right.
room and sit all day. The venue is a comedy club,
Oh,
so
right.
like, it's a non-traditional kind of fun kind of
Oh,
experience.
that's awesome. Oh, that's really fun. Good. Well, I look forward to hearing about it. Well, cool. Thanks, man. This has been really fun.
Thank you for having me.